Are you after a GTX 1660Ti laptop that runs cool with no need to undervolt, it has a decent screen and awesome speakers? Well, HID Evolution sent me the Asus ROG Strix GL531GU to review, so let's check it out. Hi, this is Stephen from OWNorDisown. The specifications of my Strix GL531GU are an i7-9750H CPU, GTX 1660Ti graphics, a 15.6-inch 1080p 120Hz panel, 16GB of RAM running in dual channel, and a 512GB NVMe SSD. Now, base price is $1,400, but via HID Evolution you can get a 0 dead pixel warranty, as well as increased RAM and storage, and like my unit, have the CPU repasted. Now in my case, with liquid metal for only an extra $65. Now, I have had many comments in my first look video saying that the stock paste also runs cool, but once you will see this how this unit performs, I am sure you will agree that $65 is well spent. It's also available as a 17-inch model as well. We are starting to see many gaming notebooks that approach the $1,500 price tag, which have an aluminum construction, so one can be forgiven their disappointment when they see that the GL531 is an all-plastic build. Now, despite this, it is very well built, and it has its two-way brush finish gives it some subtle flair, and although it can show some fingerprints, it's not as bad as, say, the Lenovo Y540. The ROG emblem on the lid does not light up. You will notice that it has a hinge forward design and a cutout at the bottom right of the panel to help with cool air being brought into the system. The keyboard deck also has a brushed finish mirroring the pattern on the lid. The Windows Precision trackpad is also plastic, has good tracking, and I like the separate mouse buttons. The keyboard has a decent feel to it, and it is fairly rigid. To the top left you have separate volume controls, mic on off button, a button that switches between the different power modes, and a button to launch the Armoury Crate software. You also have keys that switch between several default RGB key lighting patterns. Now note that the keys are not per key RGB, or they're not lit in different zones. You also have nice RGB lighting around the front and the sides, which does illuminate your desk in the dark, and there's no denying this looks pretty cool. The software lets you choose various effects such as rainbow or strobing, as well as choose the color, speed, and in-game lighting effects. The 120Hz 282 nit IPS panel is not super bright when alongside the new 419 nit Y740, but it does have a very good contrast of 1100:1. But with only 45% of NTSC, it may not be the best for color accurate work. Now, because of the hinge design to allow more airflow, you will notice that it consequently has a deeper footprint than the Legion series. Now, the bezels are slim, and Asus has chosen not to include a webcam. Screen flex is about the same as the Y740. The screen has an anti-glare coating, which does help when viewing with bright lighting. As for the backlight bleed, it was very good. I just had a small amount on the bottom right hand corner. Now, compared to a 144Hz panel, there is more ghosting, but to be honest, I didn't notice any whilst gaming. You will notice that there are no ports on the right hand side, just a side mounted speaker grill and air exhaust. On the left you have three USB 3.1 Gen 1 Type A ports and a combo headphone mic jack. Now, around the back you have the Ethernet port, HDMI and USB-C ports. Now, there is no Thunderbolt 3 or mini display port, but both are connected to the dedicated GPU, so you can use them with a VR headset. I like that power connector is at the back, which does help keep cables out of the way. Now, to get inside, you just have to remove some Phillips head screws, and here is what the air intakes look like. Be careful not to damage the two cables that are for the side and front RGB lighting. Now, here is the 66 watt-hour battery, which I got 4 hours 40 minutes of streaming YouTube at 25% brightness. And it is worth noting that the panel drops to 48 Hz when on battery, which should help with battery life. The two speakers are at the sides, and there is an open 2.5-inch bay for which Asus supplied the SATA cable and screws. Underneath the M.2 card is the 9560 Wi-Fi card. The M.2 slots accepts both SATA and NVMe drives. Now there are 2 RAM slots and HID Evolution can max this out at 64 GB. I do like the big copper heat pipes, the CPU being here and the GPU here. Now there are 2 shared heat pipes and the GPU has 2 separate ones. In total, there are 3 heatsinks which are quite large and use 0.1mm fins for increased surface area. And with air being brought in via the hinge, together with the 12-volt fans, the cooling looks quite impressive. Under load, the system pulls 182 watts, which is perfect for the 230 watt power brick. The software gives you silent, balanced and turbo power modes, which not only increases the fan speed, but also increases the average GPU clock rate from 1428 MHz in balance mode to 1609 MHz in turbo mode, as well as increases CPU boost clock, so do expect some improvement in some games. Now you can also increase the fan speed of the CPU and GPU manually, as well as overclock the GPU. I actually noticed that out of the box the GPU was already overclocked, but in my tests I did tweak it a little bit more. I ended up settling on an extra 188 MHz on the core and 199 on the memory. Now silent mode is literally that. Once the system has cooled down and you are at idle, there's no sound from the fans at all. And even under load, with using the balance mode, the fans only reach 41 decibels, and when you switch to turbo mode, we are still only at 45 decibels. So this system is definitely recommended if you want a quieter laptop. Now, despite the low fan noise, the chassis stays pretty cool. The keyboard deck running in the mid-30s, and as you can see, there's a lot of hot air pushed out of the 3 heatsinks. Now I am very impressed with the speakers. They sound very full and have good bass and are quite loud without distortion. I'm also a fan of their position at the sides, as it does provide a good stereo separation effect. At £5 5 ounces, it's pretty standard fare for a laptop of this stature. The 230 watt brick is not huge, so the actual travel rate is pretty light at £7. Now in my real-time audio test, it was a shame that LatencyMon reported that it was not suitable. In my testing, I left the power limit 2 at 90 watts and power limit 1 at 70 watts with no undervolt. In Cinebench R20, it scored 2,911 points, maintaining a high boost clock and great thermals, peaking only at 77 degrees Celsius. In my Handbrake encode test, the CPU settled at around 3,800 MHz, which is about 300 MHz higher than most. And as you can see, the CPU again was running around 77 degrees. Now this resulted in a class-leading time of 26 minutes. Now this is some 4 minutes quicker than the Helios 300, which actually needed undervolting to get anywhere near it. So is there much difference in performance between balanced and turbo modes? Yes, in most games there are, and you can overclock a bit beyond that. Here is Rainbow Six Siege as an example, using 1080p ultra settings. On the left we have balance mode with balanced fans. Now remember, this is 41 decibels of fan noise. In the middle is turbo mode with turbo fan and 45 decibels of fan noise. Now the CPU is pulling 55 watts, yet still only reaches about 83 degrees. You definitely see a frame rate boost over balance mode. On the right is turbo mode using the turbo fan, but overclocked. Again, we see a boost in frame rate with very good temperatures. Here I compare it against the 1660 Ti in the Lenovo Wi-Fi 40. Balance mode was basically the same as the stock Wi-Fi 40, but the Asus GL531 definitely had some headroom to squeeze out a bit more performance. 195 FPS is great. Now Battlefield 5 DX11 using ultra settings, balance mode on the left and turbo on the right. Again, you see a few more watts to the CPU in turbo mode, allowing for a better boost clock. Yet still very good thermals. You also gain a few extra FPS for only a small amount of extra fan noise. Again, we see the turbo mode help push the Asus GL531 past the Wi-Fi 40. Remember also that the Wi-Fi 40 ran very hot. Now the cooling on this Asus is very good. Far Cry 5, I used the inbuilt benchmark to record the frame rate, but here is some gameplay to show you the thermals and clock rates. Here I use ultra settings, balance mode on the left and turbo mode on the right. Now if you can run Far Cry 5 with temperatures in the low 80s, you know your system has good cooling. Again, turbo mode does a great job of locking in a higher CPU clock rate and helping to squeeze out a few more FPS. In fact, overclocking in turbo mode gave an extra 10% here, which is very good. It actually matches the Helios 300 with the same conditions. So how would I sum up the Asus ROG Strix GL531? Well, I came away very impressed. It is a very solid performer with great speakers and low thermals. It was a pleasure to game on. Battery life is okay too. You know, if you can get over 4 hours on a gaming notebook, that is good for me. The screen is fine for gaming, but for those looking for a super bright and great color gamut, may look elsewhere. I don't know why they didn't use a standard 144Hz panel, but backlight bleed was minimal and build quality is good. As usual, HID Evolution did a great job on this, and all their work is warranted. If you choose a stock model, I still think you will get good thermals, perhaps in the high 80s, and I think this may be one of the better 1660 Ti laptops I have reviewed. Now thanks for watching. Remember, like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.